God bless everybody today. It is February 17th of 2026 and we had a solar eclipse today, and we are going to have a complete blood moon on March 3rd going into March 4th, and so there's going to be a lot happening in the next couple weeks. This video is going to cover mainly the next month and a half and how the Paradigm 2030 chart and prophecy that's built directly into the Bible is reflecting real-time events today. So it's been about 3 months since I did my last video. That was November 8, 2025. I was talking about how we would start to see this year of Noah's flood affecting us as we move forward. That was on November 8th of 2025, and look how the sea change has happened in the Middle East, and now we have a potential confrontation and strike against Iran possibly happening in the next couple weeks, because Trump's given them a 2-week window period of time today to make a decision. So that's going to play into this text file that I'm going to get ready to show you. So today was also the start of the Chinese astrological year of the fire horse of 2026. This occurred also on February 17th today during the solar eclipse, and so all these things are starting to culminate. It's trying to point us possibly to a second seal event, since this is a red horse. And when you go to Revelation 6 verse 3, it talks about how he had opened a second seal and heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And then went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat upon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. So Jesus clearly warns his disciples when they ask him some of the signs that we would see before we would get into this Antichrist phase. And part of that would be that we would see wars and rumors of wars. And we're seeing that basically across the globe at this point. There seems to be no peace, and all factions that don't get along are really pretty much going to war against each other. And that's pretty much a global event at this moment in time. So we're going to go directly to this Paradigm 2030 chart. I've been working on this almost a decade. It seems to be playing out in the last 3.5 years. We'll see how it plays out in the rest of this Shemitah cycle, which would be about another 3.5 years. The date stamp today is 1301 days to the Feast of Trumpets of 2029, which in my opinion is when the seventh trumpet happens and we're removed. So we have approximately 1301 days, which means that if you have 1260 days of Antichrist, you're down to 41 days, and this is going to break fairly quickly and compress extremely quickly as we move forward, especially if we see an attack on Iran, or Iran launches an attack on our Israel, our bases, and like Saudi oil fields and things like that, which could happen at any time as they're going through these negotiation process. But Trump's given them today 2 weeks to give them an ultimatum to make a decision, and then he's probably going to have to do something, because Iran is not going to come to the table in the manner that he wants. So if you go to endofdayssurvival.com and come down the page, there's some PDFs. If you click on this 5th PDF, that actually takes you to the Paradigm 2030 chart. Like I say, this chart is extremely extensive and complex, so if you haven't been following the channel, it may be confusing, but I believe I can explain it as we go into the text file. And I'm not going to use this chart. I'm just going to show you that you're in this area about here. So this area right here is the start of the solar eclipse that we just had today on February 17th. And I can blow that up just a little so you can see this easier, because I want you to actually be able to follow this. So February 17th is where we are right now, and we got Ramadan beginning, so we're going into the Muslim holy month. And I'm going to go through this through approximately April 9th to show you how this actually is going to happen, I believe. And there was something that was said today by Trump and an event that occurred, which I believe gives us a clearer picture of understanding of where this is going to go and how this is going to happen. So I've laid this out on a text file so that we can understand hopefully better how this is happening. So the paradigm chart has not changed. I just reordered a few of the sequences within this month and a half because I want to make sure that I'm getting this as accurate as possible. And when I originally built it, I didn't have all the information that I have now. So I'm trying to give you the best possible information that I can so that you can get ready, get your oil in your lamp, because this is getting ready to break and take you into a beast system by March 30th of 2026, because that is your 3.5 year gap to the Feast of Trumpets of 2029, September 10th. So that 3.5 year gap of time starts on March 30th of 2026 and runs all the way to September 10th of 2029. So if you come to the chart, that would be this area here, which is the signing of the covenant of the treaty, of the 7-year treaty, which is broken halfway through. He clearly tells you it's not a 7-year treaty, it is broken halfway through. That starts on March 30th of 2026, because when you go 3.5 years or 1260 days to the Feast of Trumpets of September 10th of 2029, which I believe is your 7th trumpet rapture event, all this stuff has to be compressed in here because this is the period of Antichrist. So we're building up into the Antichrist period, which I believe will start in approximately a month and a half. We will see how that turns out. So I have not updated the Paradigm 2030 chart because I want to see how this plays out in the next month, month and a half. But I'm going to give you this text file in this video so that you can then compare the two and see how it's modified just a little bit. But it hasn't changed that much. But there was an event today that occurred that seemed to really affect this timeline, and so I wanted to bring that to your attention once we get there. So let's get into this biblical event sequence. This really started approximately January 20th, 2026, and like I say, this time gap that we're working in is going to go to April 9th of 2026. This is going to then place you into a beast system around March 30th in this time gap. So this is extremely important information, and you need to be paying attention because things are getting ready to change. It's going to be an overnight sensation, and no one's going to be ready, and 95% of the population thinks they're going to be raptured and not have to go through any of this. So it's going to be a fairly extreme shock to people once they realize what's really happening in front of them, and then we're going to have to try to figure out how to pick up the pieces, guys, and save souls before we get to that March 30th mark, because once you get into that beast system and Antichrist is on the ground, you cannot take that mark, either in the hand, forehead, or whatever that is, however that looks. You cannot take it because you will lose or forfeit your soul forever. So we're fighting for souls, and that clock is ticking down to where we approximately have about a month and a half before we go into that system, which will then put people in a compromising position when they have not been raptured, they haven't done anything, and they're not ready, and then they're in a terrible condition, as you're going to see as we move forward in the next month and a half, how bad this is going to get on the ground, that they're going to be compromised, and even the countries may be compromised to the point they might be indoctrinated into the blue system, into the beast system, as this country starts to move into a blue wave and makes Trump a lame duck president as we go into 26. And the Democrats, in my opinion, and you may not agree with this, but I believe that they, not necessarily knowingly, but would you indoctrinate you into that beast system, because it's just they hate Trump so bad, so they just do it because of spite, if anything else. So like I said, this is a real-time chart. It has been playing out for the last 3.5 years, and I've adjusted it so it's accurate for the last 3.5 years, and it is leading you up into a sequence to this Iranian war, which would then absorb Iran into the Ezekiel 38-39 prophecy, because Daniel 8 would complete, moving 10 nations towards the attack on Israel that's getting ready to happen in the next few weeks. So let's get into the text file, and I'm trying not to make this too long a video, but there's a lot here to cover, so I'm going to do the best I can. So on the chart I had this January 20, 2026 date, which was the start of potentially the destruction of Iran once Turkey's forces collapse the Kurds, which they are in the process of doing right now. The Kurds have pretty much collapsed to the east of the Euphrates. They're getting ready to collapse into Iran. Trump has pulled all the troops out of Syria and Iraq is also working with Syria as proxies through Turkey to genocide the Kurds down into Iran, and then you would see a potential Ezekiel or a Daniel 8, Daniel 8 prophecy complete, because once it clearly tells you once the Kurds align with, or the Medes align with the Iranians or the Persians, we would see Turkey come over and crush them. So I use this date because back in 330 BC on January 20th, and this is a history lesson that plays out in the past, will play out in the future in a similar fashion. He clearly tells you there's nothing new under the sun. I'm going to show you what happened in the past. It's going to reflect the future. So on January 20th in 330 BC, we had the Battle of the Persian Gate. I talked about this probably for a year or two in my videos, and how this was going to affect us as we move forward. And we were at that date, and something extremely important happened on that very specific date that I'm going to show you in this article. So on January 20th, I had stated that we would see this potential invasion by Turkey into Iran. I believe this is still going to happen in the next month and a half. I'm going to show you how I believe this is going to happen. This is just the start of the sequence of events that will actually take you into a completion of Daniel 8 into Ezekiel 38 and 39, which will then take 10 nations against Israel as we move forward by the end of March this year. So on January 20th, now this date's been out here a long time, guys. These dates, if you go back in my videos, these dates have not changed, and the paradigm mostly hasn't changed. I'm just changing the sequence in these gaps of time so that they are real-time events, and I'm not speculating. So they're literally being filled out as time is playing out in real-time events. So on January 20th of 2026, Turkey, I indicated we were going to see the start of the Battle of the Persian Gate, which would collapse the Kurds into Iran, and then we would see Turkey start to compress everything and then go in and actually eliminate both the Kurds and Iran, as Daniel 8 states. On January 20th, U.S. shifts. Trump states he's going to shift away his support from the Kurdish forces in the fight against ISIS because Turkey believes they're considered a terrorist group. So I believe for some time, and most people won't agree with me because they don't believe God has the ability to give us a clear picture, I guess, and a map to the end, and fairly specific dates on when things are going to happen, even though he draws us huge picture out for you and tells you the sequence of events that are going to happen. So once we extrapolate that down, we should be able to understand somewhat what's getting ready to happen to us. So when I had this date of the Battle of the Persian Gate, which was January 20th of 330 BC, and I moved it into the future date now based on biblical events that have to happen, we saw on that very specific date of January 20th that the U.S. Shifts away from the Kurdish-led forces in fight against ISIS. This is extremely important because we are abandoning the Kurds. Turkey is now in the process of genociding them, so we've sort of thrown the Kurds under the bus, and they're going to collapse down into Iran, and that will then form into an alliance between Iran and the Kurds, which will then allow Turkey to come in and eliminate both these threats, then allowing Turkey to absorb Iran into the 10 nations, since he has all the other nations at this moment in time included. There's basically 9 of them. The last one is Iran, and so once it falls, he would then take those 10 nations against Israel before the end of March of this year. So I had this date on here, and so when Trump came out on that very specific date and said, hey, I'm abandoning the Kurds, I thought, wow, that's interesting. I guess we're getting ready to go into an attack on Iran, and the Kurds are going to collapse down. We're going to see these two nations align, and then Turkey would come over and crush them. Because, look, Trump knows, as if you've been following the news at all, to do a regime change on Iran, you're going to have to put boots on the ground. You cannot do regime change by air because there's too much infrastructure underground and different things like that. The only army that has the capacity to do this, since no one else wants to, is Turkey. And Turkey has the second largest military in NATO up to ours. We have the first, Turkey's the second. They have the capacity, they have drone factories, they have all these different capacities. Israel even states that if we don't want a war against Turkey, it won't go well. Turkey is going to put boots on the ground, not only in Syria, as they have through proxies when they took that over in December. That was through Syrian proxies through Turkey, through Damascus. Then Iraq is in the process of being absorbed by Turkey as they're moving the Kurds to Iran. And then we're going to see the Kurds collapse into Iran, and then we're going to see them align with Persia, and then Turkey's going to keep moving east, and he's going to absorb Iran, which then would complete your 10 nations going in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So when Trump came out and said that on this date, you can't write this stuff. This was in the last couple of weeks. That he was going to shift away from the Kurds, and I had this date on there for some time, that God is showing you that he's using history as a lesson for us to follow here, I believe. And so I've been talking about how that occurs for some time now, and he's not going to hide anything from us. He will let us know exactly what he is going to do. And if you go back and you look at any of the prophets in the past, he always told them what was going to happen, and they were then sent out to warn the nations or the people or whatever before calamity hits. And so the people that say that you can't know anything, I disagree with you on this, because I believe our Creator is so omnipotent that he has the capacity to literally build a paradigm into the book so that we can understand once he unseals it for the last week or the last 7 years, that you're going to have a fairly clear picture of what's getting ready to happen. So I had also had a date stamp on the paradigm of February 11, 2026, which sort of reflects a number of things that I just showed you. The fiery horse year, you've got these potential wars breaking all over. You have a potential judgment or an attack on Israel happening through Iran. All these things are starting to culminate into prophecy that we're getting ready to watch happen in front of us. But I had originally had, based on an old king to new king today, in Zechariah 1 verse 7 and 8, that on February 11th, 2026, and I'm not going to go through how I extrapolate the dates because you have to take the king, the month, year, and day in the Bible, convert it to a Jewish calendar date, which gives you the date I have here, which then tells you what's getting ready to happen next. So on February 11th, I had indicated that Iran and Persia, or the Kurds and the Medes, would both fall as nations. Now that has not happened, but I believe it was a preemptive omen to what was getting ready to happen as we move into this month. Okay, between now and March 30th of 2026. Okay, that he would then, once Iran falls, he would combine 10 nations and we would see a second siege on Jerusalem, Israel, as we move forward. The prophecy in Zechariah 1, 7 and 8 sort of goes along with the fiery horse. So Zechariah, in Zechariah 1 verse 7 and 8, sees a man upon a red horse, sort of reminds you of the second seal. They're standing in the myrtle trees, which is a representation of the nation of Israel. Possibly Israel and Jerusalem would then go under judgment, which I believe they're getting ready to have happen, because once you attack Iran is either going to launch prior to the attack on them, or they're going to launch a retaliatory strike once they get attacked. In my opinion, it would be stupid for Iran to wait to be attacked and then to launch everything that they have, because this is a regime change thing. And so I believe that once these talks fall apart in the next 2 weeks, possibly around the end of the complete blood moon date of March 3rd, 4th, we would see then this attack. And it's amazing that the dates that Trump set for the 2 weeks actually set between this solar eclipse on February 17, 2026 and this blood moon event on March 2nd and 3rd. It's about 2 weeks. So it's interesting that we're walking into some pretty interesting times. So we see this man on a red horse, as we're talking about a judgment against Israel, how that's going to affect them as we move forward. On the 17th, today, you had a number of things happen. The beginning of Ramadan. You have the beginning of the fiery horse year in the Chinese calendar. You also had the solar eclipse today. So that was extremely important. And then you're going to, like I said, have this blood moon event on March 3rd, basically, as you go into, because it overlaps depending on where you are in the world. So it's a possible 2-day event sort of thing. And so you have all these events that are culminating and warning us that something's getting ready to happen, probably against Israel. I believe that the attack on Iran is going to go horrifically because everybody's been planning for it. They've been bringing in shipments of arms from China, Russia, and just about everywhere. When we attacked, or when they attacked Israel in June of last year, and then we did a retaliatory strike in June against their facilities, they launched about 300 to 500 missiles and drones and things, and they were doing impacts in Israel, actually penetrating their shields. And so I believe that when this one takes off and actually occurs, you're going to see thousands of missiles and a whole lot more damage on the ground. And also you're going to see regional impacts in neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia, potentially, maybe even Jordan and some of these places, because they've been helping knock down some of the missiles and things like that. So Iran's going to lash out because of regime change, and so they aren't going to care, and they're going to launch everything that they have, which is then going to force massive destruction on the ground throughout the whole region, also bringing in a lot more players at the same time. Um, when that does happen, I would suspect that the markets will collapse, fuel will spike, the bonds will spike, and we will start to see a massive meltdown on a global level on economics, as well as the Middle East collapsing, potentially the dollar collapsing, and a number of stagflationary type events globally across the globe as fuel prices 4x up, as we saw that back in 1973. Look, when the Arabs get in the room and you see um, them impacted, they have a tendency, especially if you're shutting down major corridors like the Strait of Hormuz, and you're impacting global supply chains and things like that, the fuel is going to spike, and it will spike up to where you could potentially see, back in 1973, pump prices X'd up 3 to 4 times. So if you look at your pump price now of approximately $3 a gallon here in Illinois, you could see possibly $10 to $12 a gallon oil as you move forward into the next couple months here. So we had the solar eclipse on the 17th today. You got the year of the fiery horse. You got the start of Ramadan all together at the same time. So that should give you, it's threes. God likes threes. So there's a lot going on there. Between February 17th of 26, when we decided to start another second round of talks with Iran in Geneva, giving them a 2-week window between February 17th and March 3rd, 4th of 26 for the next phase of negotiations. And so when you click on this link, I thought the timing was extremely important because we're at this solar eclipse getting ready to go into a 15-day gap of time to a complete blood moon, which I believe is potentially signaling a judgment against Israel as we move forward. So all these things are seeming to line up. We'll have to see as we move forward how this all plays out. So on March 2nd, 3rd, depending on where you are in the world, you're going to see a complete blood moon. Okay, this is extremely important. Another thing that I would mention at the solar eclipse is this was a ring of fire solar eclipse, which should sort of indicate that maybe the ring of fire across the globe might light up as we move forward also. Because if you're going into the sixth seal, into the first 4 trumpets before an Antichrist phase, a lot of natural disasters and things are going to occur, as I'm going to show you as we move forward into the first 4 trumpets, and that would affect you on the ground, even in this country. So on March 2nd and 3rd of 2026, you have a complete blood moon. It's interesting, on March 2nd, you have the Fast of Esther. On March 3rd, you have Purim. This is extremely important because this is the 3rd blood moon in a year that runs from Purim 2025 to Purim 2026. So the first blood moon was on Purim 2025. Then you had another blood moon around the Feast of Trumpets in September. Solar eclipse also attached each of these, and a 3rd blood moon, which we're going to have on March 2nd and 3rd on Purim. So I think he's trying to warn you. This is extremely important to understand. If the 2-week notice Trump has applied ends on March 3rd and 4th during the complete blood moon and negotiations fail, I would expect one of 2 things to happen. and there's basically one of two things that could happen, and that's about it. Iran will launch a preemptive strike before we attack them so that they can, because this is regime change, they're going to launch everything and try to hit as many possible targets, and then we would come in, hit them as hard as we can. Turkey would come in with boots on the ground, and we would then do regime change with Iran. If the U.S., Israel, Turkey, and the other allies, proxies like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and others, attack in a full-scale attack on Iran, and they know this is regime change, then Turkey would also put boots on the ground and complete the removal of the Iranian government. Also completing Daniel 8, absorbing Iran into their 10 nations that would then give them the 10 nations to go against Israel. He would give them an hour of power. If that's on a biblical calendar of 1,000 years to 1 hour of God, it's approximately 15 days. So we have this interesting gap between, and this is going to be interesting as you start to look through some of this. So on March 3rd, you got the blood moon. 15 days later would be March 18th, which is the end of Ramadan. I can't make this stuff up. It's supposed to be like this because God is very logical and systematic in how he does things. So when you get past March 3rd and this complete blood moon, I think this is when things break, because now Trump has given them the 2-week notice. They're not going to negotiate, and this is going to be an impasse. Trump has threatened regime change, as well as he stated to the Iranian people that he would come in and help them. So he is under a gun, and the only thing that these people understand over here are threats and force. And so if Trump doesn't do anything, it will make him look weak on the world stage, and none of these guys will respect him anymore. And at that point, he won't have any power to do anything. As well as you have a blue wave coming in, which is probably going to make him ineffective as you go into midterm 26 elections, even if you have them, because as the world gets ready to collapse, you may not have them, but still the blue will override him and possibly put you into a beast system as we move forward into March 30th. But it's interesting because I had a date stamp on March 7th on the Paradigm 2030 chart. Now, this is interesting because I had originally on the chart, now like I say, the chart is not changing that much. It's just trying to figure out exactly what he's telling us and what days these things are all going to happen on. I originally had a 6-seal event right after March 3rd on March 4th. I believe that if you go into the chart and you extrapolate the information properly, he's going to have a red heifer sacrifice on the Mount of Olives right prior to Passover on March 7th, which is 18 Adar, which is Parah. I'm probably saying that wrong. And this is the Torah reading of Parah, number 19, which is where this all comes from in the Torah, is added to the weekly reading. Parah details the law of the red heifer and the process by which a person rendered virtual impure by contacting a dead body was purified. So if you had touched somebody or something like that, there's like a week they have to cleanse themselves before they can actually do a whole lot. And so he gave them this very specific date in Numbers 19, the sacrifice of the red heifer, which would occur, which would then allow them to purify the nations as they move forward through the blood of the heifer and the rituals that they perform at the temple. If this is the case, and you go into Zechariah 13 and 14, which we're going to do here, the red heifer sacrifice would have to happen on a very specific date. He's alluding to in Numbers 19 that it would occur around Adair 18. And if you go into Zechariah 14:4 right after that, he's going to split the Mount of Olives in half by Jesus standing his feet on both sides of the mountain and splitting the mountain from north to south, creating an exodus for the third of the Jews to be hidden for the 1260 days in Edom, Jordan, or possibly Mount Sinai, Saudi Arabia, where they were taken originally in the first Exodus, based on Zechariah 14:4. This is extremely important because this is possibly a sixth seal event, because he's literally coming down, splitting this mountain in half, and allowing the exodus of his people prior to the Antichrist beast system getting ready to come in. It's extremely important that we can understand and see some of this. And I'm not sure that I've got this totally right, but I believe this is a much better sequence of events than what I had originally on the chart, which is really close. But like I say, I'm looking at these dates, these date stamps, the dates that he tells us that we sort of need to be watching for the red heifer sacrifices. This is extremely important because he would cleanse his people prior to them being exited to the hidden place for the 1260 days, because he has to cleanse them to be closer to them, because they're corrupted at this point in time. They're not pure at all. So he would have to do this red heifer sacrifice, purify them, so that he can then take them to the hidden place and hide them for the 3.5 years. If this is the case, and he's literally splitting the Mount of Olives in half, this could be the sixth seal event, which brings in a seventh seal event on the next day. This is extremely important timing, because if you look at the timing that he tells us in the seventh seal, there's about a half an hour of silence in heaven. Not here, in heaven. Well, a half an hour of silence is about 7.5 days on Earth, which would then take you from March 8th to approximately March 14th or 15th, depending on how you want to extrapolate what about a half an hour of silence means. At this moment in time, your 144,000 elect would be selected. Your four winds of heaven would be held back until the release of Antichrist and the false prophet on the sixth trumpet as you move forward here. And that's going to happen in a few days after this. So watch how this timeline goes. This has not changed that much from the original timeline that I believe I have dated out there at like November 25th, I think is the last time I updated it. As you move into the trumpets, because you've now had the sixth seal and the seventh seal, so now you're moving into the trumpets, these will hit in a fairly quick procession, because you're getting ready for an entrance of Antichrist, and he's going to make pain upon the world so that you're going to follow this beast. He tells you he's going to put you in pain. He wants you to make a decision here. Are you going to follow the beast? Are you going to follow him? If you follow the beast, if you take that mark, you lose your soul forever. You never have the ability to regain that capacity to be saved again. He clearly tells you it's one of the unforgivable sins. You cannot take the mark of the beast in your hand or your forehead. He clearly tells you cannot be part of that system. My question is, if this economy collapses and we go into a blue wave, into a beast system, indoctrinated, then how do you stay off the system in this country, as this country is completely divided and we're watching the churches fractured because they've been lied to about a pre-trib rapture? And God clearly talks about this great falling away because, well, the churches have lied to you. You haven't prepared your oil. You have nothing ready. You're still here. You haven't been raptured. Antichrist is getting ready to come out on the ground. And now the world has been decimated by trumpets that we're getting ready to go over here. So you have this seventh seal event. He's got a half an hour of silence, which takes you into about a week of time in heaven, that he's preparing Satan to be thrown down to the earth for 3.5 years upon us to make us make a decision on who we want to follow here. The four winds are being held back until the sixth trumpet, which occurs approximately on March 19th. As we move forward here, you're going to see this. So prior to that, you have a massive destruction on this planet. You have four trumpets that go off that put us in a terrible condition on the ground and eliminates about a third of the planet based on what he's showing us here. And so we need to understand this. Now, I believe as we move forward, I'm going to sort of give you an idea where this devastation would occur. And so when we look at these first four trumpets, so you're going into March 8th, seventh seal. You have about a week of time before we start the trumpet phase. There's a half an hour of silence in heaven, about a 7.5 day period of time here. That takes you to March 14th, March 15th. He then starts to unleash the trumpets because he's now getting ready to remove Satan from heaven. So on March 15th, 2026, we see the first trumpet event, the first angel sounds, and there is followed by fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees. They're talking about a third of the earth. Okay? Now think about the decimation that's going to happen in the first four trumpets before you get to an Antichrist phase here. A third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grasses burned up with it. Then the second trumpet comes off, which I think is an extremely important trumpet, which will remove the communist threat out here, and we won't have to worry about the communists anymore because this is a Jew, Christian, Muslim issue. It has nothing to do with communism. So when the second trumpet sounds, you have a second angel come out. He sounds the trumpet. A great mountain burning with fire. I don't know why it's doing that. With fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood. A third part of the creatures in the sea that were destroyed and had life had died, and a third part of the ships in the seas were destroyed. I've talked about where this potentially could happen because I believe he does not want the communists to be part of this issue. He would then take care of them and judge them on their works because they don't believe in the Son anyway, and they don't believe in religion in general in the way we do, and so he's just going to judge them in the book of life at the white throne judgment in Revelation 22 as we move forward. The second trumpet, though, this fiery mountain burning, he's going to take it. It's going to be like a big asteroid almost. He's going to throw it into the ocean. And I believe that if you threw a large fiery mountain into the Pacific between Alaska and the United States, Russia, China, and Hawaii, in that gap of ocean, it would then radiate a fairly large tsunami, probably 1,000, 1,500 foot tsunami, that would then go across the globe and would waste all of the coastlines in those areas. So if we look at this map, this is basically the whole globe. If you dropped a fiery mountain in the ocean approximately right in here, it would send a radius tsunami across this whole region. Okay, Hawaii wouldn't even exist. It would affect everything along these coastlines because you would have a 1,000, 15 foot, 100 foot, tsunami going across the globe. It would stop probably around the mountain ranges in the United States, so a third of the country possibly could be devastated. It would actually radiate down in here to South Africa. It would affect Australia. It would affect Indonesia. It would affect North Korea, Japan, Russia, China, all these different areas, and it would waste a third of the world. he's not going to waste a third of the world this prophecy, okay? And that's the uh, Jews, Christians, and the Muslims. The threat that he would have to be concerned about if you were the creator and you were going to play this out would be the communists in this area or the people that don't believe in him originally. Is this going to affect the other areas and people around us also? Yes, it will. A third of the world will be decimated in this second trumpet event. So second trumpet is a great burning mountain with fire cast into the sea. A third of the sea becomes blood, a third of the creatures die, and a third of the ships are destroyed, which are probably a lot of the communist fleets and things like that, so they're not a threat anymore. The third trumpet, the third angel sounds, and a great star falls from heaven, burning as if it was a lamp, and it fell into the third part of the rivers upon the fountains of the waters, and the name of the star was wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, excuse me, my dyslexia is kicking in, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. And so the question is that over in that same area that he's going to decimate a third of the waters, or is that another area? You know, maybe he's going to affect the Middle East, or maybe he's going to affect us over here. We don't really know what he means because he does not tell us what part of the third of the rivers and fountains of waters that wormwood would fall on and poison them so they become bitter and men would die of thirst and starvation, basically thirst. When you get it, now these are every trumpet is a procession in a day based on the timeline and the compression of time going into a beast system on March 30th. If you got 3.5 years of that. On March 18, 2026, you have fourth trumpet event. The fourth trumpet sounds, the third part of the sun is smitten, the third part of the moon is smitten, the third part of the stars are smitten, and a third part of them are darkened. So it's going to become hard to grow anything. Light is going to be removed from the planet. It's going to look fairly eerie, I would think. At that moment in time, we also have Satan almost being ready to thrown out of heaven as we see an angel flying through the midst of heaven, mid-heaven, some Bibles state, with a loud voice shouting about three woes, and that he's warning the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the three trumpets ready to sound, that we need to be aware of what's getting ready to happen, and Antichrist is getting ready to come upon us for the 3.5 years. These three woes he's talking about here are linked directly to the fifth, sixth, and seventh trumpet. He clearly tells you that each of them have an attached woe to them. So on the same day, based on my charting and my interpretation, and like I say, I'm trying to figure this out, I don't have a crystal ball, we would see Ramadan end on March 18th. I have been asked many times whether the Muslims or the radical Muslims would attack during Ramadan, and yes, they possibly could. This is something that they've done in the past. There have been numerous large-scale attacks by extremist groups during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan, with ISIS notably encouraging supporters to turn it into a month of calamity. Major attacks during Ramadan have targeted civilians and infrastructure, such as the 2016 Istanbul airport attack, Dhaka and Orlando attacks, and the 2003 attacks in Baghdad. So there is a high potential that they could attack during the month of Ramadan. This was not a holy month where they might not attack, and so it might happen afterwards. And based on if you have a beast system coming in March 30th, they probably have to attack during Ramadan. And they actually might use that month as a global call jihad against Israel partners and nations that are supporting them to basically take over the whole Middle East, absorb Iran and everything in the same process. So on the 19th of March, we see an interesting process possibly starting to happen, because right after this fourth trumpet on the end of Ramadan, we would see the fifth trumpet happen. The fifth trumpet, or angel, sounds his trumpet, and I saw a star falling from heaven to earth, which is Satan. So Satan, if you go into Revelation, it clearly states that Michael is standing on both sides of the pit, 1 foot on land, 1 foot on the water, reaching up to heaven, pulling Satan from heaven, allowing him to have the key to the bottomless pit so that he can extract from the abyss Antichrist, which is a dead Erdogan, into an Antichrist figure, because Erdogan is going to die during this sixth seal event, be buried within a few days after he dies, because he's a leader of a major corporate company, and then you're going to have this procession of events, these trumpets hitting, sort of like a drum roll. End of Ramadan, poof, Antichrist starts coming out. Okay, and this is extremely important timing as we go into Passover, which is right after March 30th, as you're going to see here, because he comes in with flatteries like he's Jesus, and he's going to confuse and profound the world to think that he's the one, and they haven't been raptured, so they're going to be lost to understand that this is the first guy, and they're going to be in such a miserable condition due to all this destruction up here that they will probably not be prepared, not have oil in their lamp, and they will probably be they will probably have no choice in their minds that they have to join the system or they'll starve or die, and they can't take the beast mark, and because they're not educated in the Bible and they have not been instructed well enough, they may not understand the consequences of their actions and lose their soul because of this. And so we're in a process in the next month and a half of saving souls, warning people and letting them know that they're getting ready to go into the system and they cannot take that mark. So when the 19th hits, right after Ramadan ends, and we already started to see the attack on Israel. Erdogan's dead. The 10 nations have been destroyed. We start to see these trumpets hit, and then the pit on the fifth, the bottomless pit would open on the fifth trumpet around March 19th. And so Satan is pulled from heaven. He's given the key to the bottomless pit. The pit is opened. The sun is darkened from the smoke of the pit. Locusts come out for 5 months and sting the people that do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So they're tormenting these people, which would make them also want to join the beast system because they're in pure misery at that moment in time. So they're going to want relief of some kind. As you also got the Pope sitting there, because during this resurrection that's getting ready to happen here, on March 19th, as we move forward here, the false prophet rises, which is probably the Pope. And the Pope is not a good Pope. He's already bringing the Muslims in. He's putting mosque in Rome. He's reaching out to the Muslim communities because they're losing their Christian base in the churches and they need the revenues, I'm guessing. So they're bringing in the woke group, which is the other side of the equation, and he's going to convert the churches because it clearly tells you the false prophet has impregnated powers by Satan so that he can literally pull fire from heaven to the earth to have you exalt the other beast, which is Antichrist. So you're going to have this pit open on the fifth trumpet. And the sixth trumpet would also hit about the same time, because the pit would open and then Satan would be thrown out, resurrect Antichrist from a dead Erdogan, which dies on the sixth seal, clearly, if you go to Isaiah 14, it clearly tells you this is a resurrectional event. The world would see it. They're going to bury this leader in a grave, and then he's going to pop out like a supernatural nightmare, and the world is going to, whoa, what happened there, and follow him because they don't know the difference. Then the sixth trumpet happens. You have the beast, false prophet, and the Antichrist rise. Interestingly, on March 19th, this is Nissan 1. This is important timing, guys. You need to watch the timing here. And I may be wrong, but it sure seems to line up to where it might be right. On March 19th, you start the new Jewish calendar year. It's the beginning of the new Jewish month, beginning of the new calendar year. Also, Antichrist is going to portray himself to be the Lord Jesus coming back with flatteries because you're in misery. Okay, Daniel 11:21 tells you it is prophesied that is a contemptible person shall come in peacefully and obtain the kingdoms with flatteries, pretending to be our Lord Jesus. I didn't say that. Daniel 11:21 says that. Amazingly, the next day is the spring equinox, which would then take you into a paradigm stamp. And I'm telling you, things are going to break here, guys. You have a paradigm date stamp of March 25th, 2026, where Antichrist is now on the ground and he's going against Egypt and breaks that nation due to everything that they've done and the history of Egypt against the Jews and different things like that. So God is going to break the nation of Egypt through Antichrist. Right after that, you would see the two witnesses appear because they have to show up 3.5 days prior to the signing of the treaty so that they can die 3.5 days prior to rapture, which would happen on the Feast of Trumpets of September 10th of 2029. So you would see the two witnesses come out. They would start to prophesy. I'm guessing they'll be on the Mount of Olives or over there in Israel somewhere, standing there prophesying, probably close to the Temple Mount, somewhere in that area. And you also have this, I'm not going to, Sabbath, Hagoldol, I'm probably saying that totally wrong, translated into the Great Sabbath on the 28th, which this takes place right before Passover. You have a signing of the treaty of the covenant of death, which is broken halfway through on March 30th. And then that starts your 1260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years into the beast system, the rise of the Antichrist and the false prophet. And that next day, right after that signing, which I think is, God has to have a little bit of humor here. April 1st is Fool's Day. So I wanted to add that there because I think he's going to fool us. You're going to follow the first guy, or you're going to know that he's not the one that you should be following. Okay? That runs between April 1st and 9th, and so that would then take you into a beast system. So look, the next month and a half, based on what I'm seeing out here, is going to change your world. You're already starting to see metals collapse. You're seeing Bitcoin collapse. The government's going into massive stagflation. The job numbers, they said were okay, but if you actually peel back the numbers, they were not that great. And so people are in a desperate situation, and I think a lot of the jobs that are actually being created are people getting 2 and 3 or 4 jobs to try to maintain inflationary pressures on them and their income so that they can maintain food on their tables. So I think once you break down the numbers and realize, especially with the purge of the illegals, you're having more people literally going in and having to find, especially older workers, find multiple jobs to maintain their condition. And if this breaks and fuel goes up, then that would then send you into a massive stagflation and hyperinflation situation. So I just wanted to bring these things to your attention. Get oil in your lamp. You are possibly within weeks to a month, month and a half into a beast system. So if you're not ready, you may not get ready. If you don't think if you think you're going to be raptured, good luck with that. It's probably not going to work out well for you. And I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't believe in that philosophy. And I just want to let you know, God bless you. Be safe out there and keep your eyes open.